Oh, it is live now. Okay, so good morning, everybody. We're going to go to Asia in Trouble here. This is part three. This is part three of Europeans behaving badly, and in Europeans behaving badly in this aspect, the British will be the Europeans behaving badly. Because by now they've learned how to insidiously, early on, if you think about the Belgians, it was very brutal and it was in your face, just absolute brutality. Then we get into exploitation and brutality in India. Now it's got to just be insidious, long-term destruction of a culture's foundation. And that's how the British dismantle the Qing dynasty. All right, and it's genius. It's evil genius, but it is genius nevertheless. Anyway, here's Qing China, really Manchu China, but of course they changed the names to Qing, which means pure. In order to make themselves seem a little bit better than they really are. And they are the successors to the Ming Dynasty, as you would recall. And it was the Ming Dynasty that had, at the very beginning, flirted with outreach, maritime outreach with Zheng He, and then recalled him because they had a sudden attack of the we want to be Chinese thing again. And so they become the very insular, very isolationist, and they only worry about their surrounding neighbors, okay? They only worry about their surrounding neighbors. And, we have a return to the Confucianist system, the very basic the basic idea of Chinese structure. They don't aspire to conquer the world because, well, I mean, they already are, well, they are the best, right? They're very ethnocentric. They don't need to conquer their world. I mean, after all, they reached out. They found there was nothing there, just some clever little items that were mass produced, maybe. And the religions were subversive to the power system, to the power structure that the Chinese had at the time. So nobody really has anything they want, except for what? Silver. Right. So they will trade for silver. Let's see. Didn't expire. Something else I should add is they had long had the ability to industrialize. They had natural power sources that would not deplete the forests. They had, this natural power source was methane vents. You know, just start a fire and you got a natural gas, not methane, it'd be natural gas vents. But they didn't industrialize. They made the decision. It wasn't even in their head. It wasn't part of the Chinese paradigm to industrialize. Because why do you industrialize? Why do you industrialize? What is the objective of industrialization? Compete on what level?
National or global.
On a national or global level. And industrialization, which is no more really than the intensification of existing forms of production. Why is the idea of production against the Chinese paradigm? Why is the idea of increasing production anathema to the Chinese paradigm or against the Chinese paradigm? They don't want to compete? Okay. Yes, sir?
Production requires, or production produces excess, which requires trade.
Production Creates excess, which requires trade, which involves whom? Outsiders, but the intermediary, let's not forget the intermediary. Who does the selling? Merchants. And merchants are where on the Chinese high? Yeah, they don't like them. They never have. They've always been very low in the Chinese hierarchy. So they just don't industrialize. There's no need to, because it's just, that's not what they do. They will allow Europeans to trade until they feel uncomfortable with what's going on, and until they feel, until they just feel a little anxiety about what's going on, and then they kick them out. They are fierce protectors of the culture. 1724, I know we're going back a little bit before the unit, but Christianity is banned because it is considered threatening to the hierarchy, to the existing hierarchy, but trade is still allowed through the port of Canton. And now you can buy luxury goods, but you got to pay in what?
Silver.
Silver. Chinese want silver. Chinese want silver. So they allow limited contact. Limited contact. But they remain a highly organized, confident civilization. And notice, if you will, on this map, it's 1644 through 1911. And so you're getting pretty close to that when we get to like the 1850s. If you think about the old Chinese dynastic system, we're getting up there towards the top where there's going to be, on the 10, 11 o'clock on the Chinese dynastic system, when there's going to be some kind of turnover, right? And it's no change. I would argue that there is no change in the Chinese dynastic system even until today. It's just a governmental system. All right. Let's see. What's the very basic element of Chinese culture? Who are the most important people?
Good men.
Okay, philosophically speaking, yes. But let's say economically speaking. What forms the basis of the Chinese economy? Peasants. Somebody said peasants. Okay, farmers, right? And let's see, who am I going to pick on? Okay. So here I am, a British guy, and I am the British government, and I know that we can't take the Chinese on man for man. We just can't do it. We have been unable to infiltrate, so to speak, China via a joint stock company like the British East India Company because of their trade restrictions. So we've got to figure out some other way to wiggle our way into China to develop inroads to get control of this vast market. Lots of people, that's a market. You want to be able to sell them things. That's the objective of industrialization and capitalism. And I realize that the basis of their society is the peasant. I'm in India, and it's not just me. It's not just one Englishman that comes up with this idea. It's a policy. And so I will sneak into China, and I'll find some hardworking Chinese peasant. Like, I know that she does back-breaking work all the time, supplying produce, agricultural produce, to the dynasty. And I'll say, you know, I know you work really hard, and you're poor. You got to pay your taxes in silver. I understand this. You're very low paid. But I want to give you something that will maybe help you cope a little better. Put this in a pipe and smoke it. Whoa.
Opium.
Try this opium.
That's good.
The first hit's always free. Here you go. It is. It is. There's a synthesis point that comes out of this towards the end. Here you go. I'll be back to talk with you later. So, here it is. We'll go here now. 1773, on a large scale, the Brits introduce opium to Chinese peasantry, the foundation of Chinese economic power, because they feed the entire population through smuggling. I might have already said that. And so it's a week later. So how was it? Was it a good coping? Was it a good coping mechanism for all your backbreaking hard work? Sure. Okay. Well, you know, I can still tell you're tired. So here's some more, and give some to your friends too. I'll just give it to you. Take it. Take it and give it to your peasant friends back there.
Yes.
And I'll be back in a week, okay? And so this goes on. This goes on for a while, and finally, you know, I make her wait a little bit longer. And I come back, and I can see she's a little shaky and maybe bleary-eyed. This has been going on for maybe a year, because the British entrepreneurs are patient. So I say, "You doing okay?" To which you reply,
Give me more drugs.
and I will say, "Okay, I can see you've gotten your friends in on it too." But the problem is, the Chinese are beginning to suspect that I'm doing this. So I'm incurring a little bit more of a risk. So I'm going to have to make you pay. And I can only, you know, I can really only accept one form of payment. Guess what it is? Silver. Well, both. And we'll get into that. Now remember, China has been wanting mainly silver since the Roman Empire, since the Han. As we saw during the early modern period, China was just bringing in as much silver from Potosi and the New World as they possibly could. And this is finally an opportunity to stick it back to the Chinese with the silver. This is finally the chance. In 1838, well, you know, okay, well, it's over now. As we all know, the Manchu government, or the Qing governments, because that's what they call themselves, they're pure, pass a law forbidding the sale, possession, transport, consumption, distribution of opium. And And as we all know, when you pass a law forbidding something, it stops. Right?
Yeah.
It stops. And so what happens is she is now my main contact, and she is dealing to all of you. So now I have to say, look, you know, your government has this law on the books that increases vastly my risk bringing this in and increases your risk distributing it. So what happens to the price? It goes up. And how do you pay? Silver. So this is called destabilization of an economy. It is a tried and true method that continues to this day. And the British really introduced, it had been tried before, but this is a very, very effective form of economic destabilization. The next issue that pops up with this opium trade that the British have forced is a leaked bust. I'm trying to put it in modern terms, a leaked bust. The Brits decide they're just gonna go direct with this, bypass their usual dealers, and they're going to bring merchant ships into a main port loaded with opium. However, they are like, hey, we're going to bring the merchant ships. You might want to do that. And of course, the information leaks, and the Chinese are there to seize this opium and burn it. And, well, you know, kind of like the DEA does in Mexico or wherever the DEA does the burning. In a confined area, and well, no. Wherever they do their burning. And so the British go ape and say this is a violation of our property rights. You have, without provocation, seized our ships. And so they declare war on China. This is the first of the Opium Wars. It was fought from 1839 to 1842 for this purpose. Now, you might wonder, how is it? Oh, well, by the way, the British win. Now, how is it that the British win against a vastly numerically superior opponent? It's very simple. Oh, did somebody want to? Yes, sir. Industrialization. They had superior. They had superior weapons and armament. They had superior armament, but a particular kind of armament. They did not fight the land game. They pulled an old chess trick, which is to choose your form of attack, which for the British was naval. So they just sent their fleets up these Chinese ship or Chinese rivers and obliterated the Chinese Navy and brought them to their knees. And so what results is the Treaty of Nanjing, the so-called unequal treaty, because the British get the best of everything. The British are given rights to expand trade with China. British given rights to expand trade with China. Now, part of this unequal treaty was that the port city of Hong Kong will be given to the British as a crown colony for until 1997. The British get to operate the port of Hong Kong as a crown colony. That means it's theirs. The Chinese can do nothing. I remember when this was turned over to the Chinese government in '97, and everybody thought, oh gosh, the totalitarian, they're communist in name only. The totalitarian Chinese are going to pounce on this, suck all the product out of it, and it's just Hong Kong's going to disappear. But that's not what happened. The Chinese, in their very philosophical and deep thinking and observational ways, the Chinese instead allow it to continue to operate, and they watch and they learn how to manage capitalism. And they're moving along with this. In 1844, China is forced to allow Christian missionaries back in the country. So part of this thing is to open the windows, so to speak. When you open the windows, you let in the flies. So the Chinese are forced to open their windows. Many of the Chinese merchants, however, or many of the Chinese, I misspoke when I said merchants, don't like the concessions that they are having to make to the British. So they fight the Second Opium War while the British continue to destabilize, well, the peasants, all of you guys, for 4 years. And they're defeated once again. Equally unequal situation. The Chinese are forced to open up all of their country to European trade. Everybody's going to get to have a piece here. Britain had never wanted to establish a colony like in India because they knew they couldn't. The circumstances were different in India than they were in now in China, and that would be a great comparative essay right there. You know, compare, contrast British imperialism in China and India. Well, you know, there was never the ability for a joint stock company to penetrate China as it had in India, right? But they wanted trading concessions. They wanted to exploit that market that existed in China. Now, if we look at the Chinese dynastic cycle, we're getting pretty close to 10 minutes until 12, which is regime change. And some of the things we see are the White Lotus Rebellion, which is a rebellion of Buddhists, which, or rather, whom are upset with government taxation and corruption. Yeah.
Is that when they light themselves on fire?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Buddhists do this from time to time, unfortunately. But yeah, taxes and corruption. And then we have the Taiping Rebellion, who want to return to the way it had been, to get rid of the Manchu dynasty and private property, redistribution of wealth. Remember, redistribute all of that land gobbled up by the big landowners and redistribute it to the people. Unfortunately, they're going to get a nasty surprise. Then, because of their inability to control their own internal problems, they certainly have to let go of their appendages first. And China, or rather Korea, is one of the first to go. In 1876, Korea declares independence, which is good for Japan. We'll explain that later. And in a way, it seems good for the Russians too. And we'll explain that a little bit later. Then they have to deal with the Sino French War. And here I'm introducing a new term, Sino, S-I-N-O. That means Chinese. Okay, you'll see it more and more and more. But the Chinese will fight against the industrialized French, and they will lose control of the Indo-Chinese peninsula. France wanted Indochina because of rubber trees. And so that's where Michelin is, that's where Michelin takes root. Get it? Okay, sorry. Rubber trees, Michelin. Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll edit that out. I don't know. If I can figure out how to edit. But, okay, you can help me with this? Awesome. But French wants control. France wants Indochina. And France will get Indochina, which over the long term will cause problems for France, and over the even longer term will cause problems for the United States right up until the 1970s. But just keep in mind, Vietnam has never been conquered. They've been occupied, but they've never been conquered. Not even the Mongols. 1895, they have to hand Taiwan over to Japan. Taiwan, also known as Formosa. They've been in the news lately. And then we get a new euphemism. Spheres of influence. Spheres of influence. This is kind of like protectorates. Okay? Spheres of influence are created by Europeans. And so this is, there are some propaganda posters discussing European spheres of influence, and it has China like a pie or a pizza, and all these European caricatures sitting around it, kind of arguing with each other as to their slice of pie. And it's not really as, dare we say, civilized as the Berlin Conference. But it does allow, and China is powerless to stop it, it does allow, many industrialized European nations, Germany, France, the Dutch, the United States to great degree, of course, Great Britain, to have a piece of the pie. And speaking of the United States creates an open door policy, an even greater euphemism. I mean, we're getting, all these euphemisms pull us further and further away from the reality of the situation which is taking place. The so-called open door policy, which supports China's, I'm missing a, now everybody can see I'm missing an apostrophe, but which supports China's sovereignty, but declares an equal trading policy for everyone. So they're shaking your hand while they're stabbing you in the back. That's really the open door policy. And okay, kind of to wrap it up here with China. Chinese culture, classic begins to crumble because it has been attacked at the most fundamental area of its existence, which is the peasantry, the creators of the food. Good thing, foot binding's abolished. That is good. I mean, sometimes you have to squeeze it really hard to get any good out of it. And this is good. 1905, the 2,000-year-old examination system is eliminated. Yay! We haven't eliminated ours yet, though. We're not 2,000 years old. 1911, imperial rule ends. Imperial rule ends, and that's where I want to bring this young fella into the picture. And this is Emperor Puyi. He is the last emperor of China. And he will be relocated by the Japanese to Taiwan, used for propaganda purposes. But that's the last emperor of China. There's a good movie. No, it's old. It was made back in the 80s, I think, the 80s. And it's called The Last Emperor, not surprisingly. It's a pretty good movie. Puyi, Emperor of Japan, or Emperor of China. And then a Western puppet bankrolled by the West, which means financed by the West, establishes a republic, which we should be familiar with now, because that's what everybody that practices industrialization, most everybody that practices industrialization has now, is a republic of some kind. And he bases his republic on land valuation, and you pay more taxes the more land you have. And so that ends up kind of putting the screws to the peasants once again. Oops. But yeah, I should have moved that there. But 1911, the Qing Empire ceases to exist. And then I would argue another governmental cycle will begin that will end in 1949 with the Chinese Communist Revolution and Mao Zedong. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Now I want to run back here to this. No, not that. This. Where else do we see? This is our little synthesis talk today. Where else do we see, for the purposes of social destabilization, on an overworked culture or overworked civilization, where else do we see the introduction of drugs, official laws forbidding the drugs, and of course prices going up, and then war on drugs, and the failure of that war on drugs? Yes, sir.
The U.S. of America.
Yeah, the U.S. of America. I would have to agree. I think you can make that argument because Americans, compared to other civilizations, work more hours than anybody else in industrialized nations and have less time off. And so if there is a demand for a coping mechanism, there will always be a supplier for that coping mechanism. And so who's the supplier?
I was going to reference the CIA-induced crack epidemic of the 80s.
Oh, okay. Well, that's true. But I'm not, I think they, okay, maybe they were trying to destabilize a particular segment of the population. That's maybe a little beyond our course, but I'm thinking more largely, I mean, you're right, but largely on more of a civilizational size, if you want to call the United States a civilization. Who would be attempting to destabilize the working force? I mean, on the surface of it. Every now and then they're big in the news. We catch somebody. What do you think? Well, I don't know about that, but I'm thinking of names. I mean, people. like, yeah, drug kingpins, like Pablo Escobar. I mean, but you never know. They might be just the middleman. They might be the her of a much larger, destabilization attempt. And maybe it is another form of state-sponsored imperialism, or state-sponsored imperialism and terror. Well, do we have any questions? Any legit questions that we can answer? Oh yeah.
Would another, like, I guess, synthesis be like, it's kind of like this, but when they gave the Native Americans the blankets with all like the diseases and stuff on them, because they were giving them gifts that would like eventually like.
That would, okay, that a blanket, it's a coping mechanism. You cope with the cold, with the cold weather, and then you cope with a really bad cold. What is that? Smallpox. You know what? I think I think you're right on with that. So if you get the opportunity to use that one, on an essay as a synthesis point. And, that's one of the things I'm not too worried about for you guys with the synthesis points, at least my groups is, that's what historians do, is they draw direct comparisons or direct contrasts with other issues in history. So, yeah.
Another thing I was kind of thinking is, do you think the British, intentionally leaked stuff to the Chinese government, that they were, bringing the big shit?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that's that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. What do I need to do here? Well, I guess that's it for this one. So what do I say? Like and subscribe.